Hello everybody, my name is David Zavislin. I'm the CAD manager here at NV5, and today's presentation is the first part of a multi-part webinar series that I'm going to be doing covering the new features of Civil 3D 2013. The intent of these webinars is to introduce you to some of the new tools that are available, not so much to show you how to use some of the basic functionality in the software. For that, I'll refer you to some of the introductory training or some of the other online resources that we have for learning Civil 3D. So if you're coming to this hoping to learn a lot about Civil 3D, I'm keeping it pretty light and really just trying to introduce what's new in the software. All right. For the survey module, or the survey components within Civil 3D, there's really only about 4 new features in 2013, and this also includes 2012, and this is what's new for those of you migrating from 2011 and up. So we're going to talk about these 4 different elements. We're going to look at the Kogo point object and some of its new behavior. We're going to take a quick look at survey database migration. They did make some changes to the survey database, which means that you will have to convert your 2011 databases to 2013 in order for them to work within 2013. And then we'll look at a couple of interesting new features in Civil 3D for the survey group, and that's going to be what are called survey queries, which we'll take a look at, and that's part of the survey database functionality, and that's mainly why they had to update the database so they could add this new component. And then we'll also look at a utility called the Kogo editor, which was available in 2011 as an extension, but I don't think too many people used it at that point, so I'm going to take this opportunity to kind of show you that tool as well. All right, so let's jump right in. For the Kogo points, the main thing we're going to see is they've enhanced the grip functionality. And one thing you'll notice, one, is that there are fewer grips when you select a Kogo point. And then they also have grip menus now for the 2 different grips. So the square grip on a point object is the label grip. So when I hover my cursor on that one, as shown on the image on the left, you'll see that you get a grip menu with the option to move the label, rotate the label, and then toggle what are called sub-item grips. And what the sub-item grips will allow you to do is you can move the individual label components independent of each other. So I could move the point number away from the elevation. So that's what the sub-item grips are. And that functionality has been available in 2011 and earlier as well. Big item here that I really like is that option to rotate the label. I could not do that in 2011. I could only align my label at a preset rotation value, or I could tell it to align with the object. So if I rotated the point, the label would then rotate. Well, now we can rotate the labels independent of the point object, which makes it real nice if you've got a real congested area of a drawing and you're trying to do some drafting. All right, so that's the rotate label option. For the point object, its grip menu, and its grip is going to be the little diamond grip here. You get the options to move the point, which will actually edit the point, changing its X and Y or northern and eastern coordinates. You can rotate the label and the marker together, so that's a little bit different, whereas this option over here leaves the point where it is and only rotates the label. And then you also have an option here where we can rotate just the marker and then leave the label at its current rotation angle. So just a little bit more functionality, makes it a little bit easier for those who are trying to do some drafting. So let me jump into my drawing file here. Which one am I in there? I want that one there. So I got a drawing here with some points. And we'll zoom in and we'll take, that's the point I had in my screen capture here. So when I grab that and grip at it, we'll see again this square grip is my label grip, so I can pull my label, stretch it to a new location, or I can hover on that and tell it to reset the label, we'll place it back. All right, so let me hover on there again. So that was move label. I can rotate the label, so you'll see as I rotate the label here, my point marker, that X symbol stays put and it does not rotate. Okay, and again, I can hover on that grip and tell it to reset if I want it back to the default orientation based on the label style. Last one here, sub-item grips. Again, now turn on little grips now so I can grab, move the elevation, or move the point number. Oops, that's the main grip. And there, I can pull the description off. Okay. And if I hover on those, I can tell it reset. Hover on that one, oops, try it again, and tell it to reset. So we can put that back. And if I go in the main one, I can toggle sub-item grips. And the main one's defined based on how the label style was created. And this style that I'm using, the elevation component is actually the first element in the style, and then the point number is located relative to the elevation that's located above, and the description is located below. So that's why we saw those three grips behaved a little bit differently. For our point marker, if I move the point, which I don't want to do because that's going to change my data, and actually in this case I can't move this point, and you'll see as I try to move it, because this point is a survey database point, so it is locked in my drawing, so I cannot edit a point that was brought in from the survey database. But I can come in, I can rotate the label and marker. So this time you'll see as I rotate both the point object, marker, and the label will both rotate. So I can grip it and move those to however I need that to display. So that works real nice. Maybe not so much for a point style that uses the X or plus sign, but if you have some symbology and you have a street sign or some kind of oriented object that you want to align with a roadway or some other feature, you can grip at it and rotate that. All right, I'm going to reset all. That pops them all back. And then again, if I just rotate now the marker, you'll see I can spin the marker object and the point stays put. Okay, so real nice functionality. I really like what they did with that. Makes a lot of the drafting tasks that we need to do with our Kogo points so much easier. All right, so let me jump back into the PowerPoint here. All right, so we looked at Kogo points. The next topic is survey database migration, and you're going to see this, and hopefully some of you have already seen this as you started working in 2013, is your existing databases are going to show up with this little shield icon, and it's indicating that the database needs to be migrated forward to 2011. I will stress that once you've converted a database to 2011, or excuse me, from 2011 to 2013, that database will no longer be accessible in 2011. So if you need to have that data available for 2011, I would make a copy of the database folder first before I did the migration. I'd probably name it something like 2011. And let me see if I've got a Windows Explorer. I do have that open, so let me come into here. So our survey databases, and I'll move this over in just a sec here. So our typical project configuration here at NV5 is under our job number, we're going to have a Civil 3D folder where we've configured Civil 3D to look for our survey databases. So if I've got this database here, this is a 2011 format. If I want to back it up, all I'm going to do is just make a copy of it and then maybe rename this one dash 2011. All right, so I'll keep that one as 11, and then we'll migrate this one forward. All right, so that's kind of one of the things, you need to kind of keep track of that and make sure that if you migrate a database to 13, you're not going to impact anybody else in your office or on the project that still needs to have access to that data in 2011. All right, so let me come back in here. So let's jump over now to our Civil 3D file. All right, so let me zoom back out so that's pretty. And I'm going to go into my tool space, and then I've got my survey tab enabled, and we'll see there's our database indicating that it is in a prior version. Actually, I'm going to right-click on here, and I'm going to tell it to refresh, and it'll actually read that folder again, and then it's going to find that copy I just made that is still in 2011 format. All right, so you can see as I hover on here, it's showing me that path and the file or folder name for that folder. So I want to migrate this one forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on it, and you get one option here, Migrate. So I'll hit Migrate. It will give you a warning dialog indicating and stressing that upon completion of this process, you will not be able to work with this database in prior versions. Do you want to continue? So yes, I will pick that yes. It will go through, it will update the database, and that little shield will go away. As long as I leave this one in the earlier version, every time I come into this panorama or this window here, I will always get these little warning shields. Not a big deal, but just kind of keep that in mind. All right, now that I've got it converted, I'm going to right-click and I'm going to open it for edit, because I actually want to go on to the next step here, and we're going to look at survey queries. So in order to create a query, I need to be able to edit the database. Okay, and for those of you who are aware that when I do open in edit mode, that database cannot be accessed by anybody else while I have it open. If I want to just use the data, I want to import points, I want to see points, then I could open it in read-only mode, which will then allow other users to simultaneously access that survey database. So kind of keep that in mind. So I've opened it for edit, and really the new feature that it's added in is going to be this section here called Survey Queries. So I'll jump back over to my little PowerPoint here, and we'll talk about a bit about survey queries. All right, this is a new feature in 2013 that allows you to manage your survey data, and that's going to be points and figures, and allows you to manage it a little more robustly. In the past, they tried to have a point group functionality in the survey database. I don't know if anyone's tried using that, but the only way you could add points to a survey point group was by picking them from a list. So if you have a project with thousands and thousands of points, that was not a real efficient or effective method for managing that data. Well, the survey queries now allow you to build these different query conditions where you can come in here and tell it, in this example here that I'm going to do this afternoon is I'm going to bring or isolate points that I want to use for my surface model, so I can look for points with specific descriptions. I'm using the start with operator, but we can do contains or equals type functions, and we'll show that once we get in. So I'm looking for 3 particular point descriptors using this. So that's why I'm using this OR function. So I'm going to grab points that either start with SV, or they start with TC for topic curve, or they start with LS for, I think this is for landscaping type points. I can then do some AND statements, which means they must meet one of these OR statements, and their elevation value must be greater than 5,700. So I can kind of use this to weed out, maybe I have some control points within these descriptions potentially that have an elevation of 0 or no elevation value. I can use this to kind of filter out some of that data. And then we can do the same thing for our figures. So when you create figures, when you import your survey data, the figures all get names. Those names are then used with our figure prefix database to sort them to layers. Well, I can now use those names also with queries, so I can tell it which figures I want to use for my surface. So this one I'm doing a little reverse logic on. I've got one figure in my project that we did a closed rectangle, so some of the points do not have elevation data, and it was a concrete slab. So I'm going to tell it to grab everything that does not start with the CS descriptor, or the CS abbreviation for the name. All right, so that's kind of the way this goes. So let me show you how this actually works now in the drawing file. So let me jump back into my file. So we have to be in the survey database. I have my database open for edit, so I can come in here and create a query. There we are. So we're on survey queries. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to pick New. And this will open up my survey query palette. So let me put that on. I was working dual monitors earlier, so I need to bring that over. And I'll go ahead, I'll name my query. And I do like a description. So I know what's going on. All right. The query.log is going to be blank. So right now it's not going to grab anything. So if I display or preview, it's not going to show anything. And for my points now, I can either do none, all, or by query. So none says don't put any points in this query. Okay, so I could set that one to none, but then do figures, and then I can have a query that just gets figure data. Or I can go the other way around. I can do points by query, set this one to none, and now I am doing a query that's just going to grab point data. So you can kind of slice these up however you want. Since I'm doing this for a surface model, it kind of made sense to me that let's go ahead and do both points and figures within the same query. So I'm going to do that by query. All right. So my points now, I need to tell it, okay, what property do I want to use to define my query? So you see in our listing here, it's basically all of the data associated with a point object. Okay, so we do elevation, number, description. If you're using point names, we can do names. If it's control points, we can access that, and those are sorted a little bit differently in the survey database. So survey does know when something is a control point. It was more than likely created by a northern easting elevation, whereas a non-control point is going to be something that was located by some sort of traverse, angle, distance, side shot type of data entry. And then it also has station points. Those are all the points where you'd set your station up when you did your traverse and side shots. Okay. And then we can also do it by coordinate values. All right, so I'm going to do this one by description. And then once we get into that, we can come in here and say, okay, our description properties are, and you'll see there's quite a few options here. We have to match exactly, so is equal or not equal. If they're numeric values, less than, greater than, okay, less than or equal, greater than equal. If it's a string, does it contain the following characters anywhere within the string? Okay, or does it not contain? So we can do some good filters. And the ones that work really well with our description keys of these next two here either starts with, you can put in our 2-character description key prefix value, or does not start with. So I want all the points except for such and such. Okay, so real powerful. So I'm going to do starts with, and I want all my spot elevations. So I'm going to just do an SV. And I'm going to put in another condition here, and here's where we have to tell it whether it's an AND condition. So an AND means it must meet both conditions to be selected, or an OR condition means it must be one or the other. So if you're doing multiple descriptions, you probably need to use the OR, because 2 points aren't going to have 2 different descriptions, or 1 point's not going to have the 2 different descriptions. So I can't type. I think I caught that there. That would have been embarrassing. All right, so I want my top of curve points, so TC, and I'm going to do one more OR condition on the description, and I'm going to do a starts with. And this one, I'm going to do the LS. And then I'm going to do an AND condition on the elevation. So not only must it match one of these descriptions based on the ORs, I also want an elevation that is greater than, and this is in near the Denver office actually, so I want anything above 5,700 feet. And this is actually a little survey of the Denver office parking lot and the little driveway that goes up to the 2nd level on their little parking garage there. All right. Once you've got that, we can kind of test this out in our drawing. So I'm going to come in here and say preview in drawing. Let me minimize this so we can kind of see what's going on. I think I killed it. But anyways, in the preview in drawing now, it's going to highlight all my points with little purple X's, so you can see it got the spot elevations, the top of curve, and then these landscape points, which are just an edging. Okay. And okay. While I'm here, while I'm in the survey query, I also want to point out there is a survey query ribbon tab, and that will come up whenever you are defining a query, but you can also get to it through the modify, and then there's a survey query button here on the modify ribbon tab that you can select that will bring that up, and then you can define queries from Civil 3D, and it'll add them to your current database. All right, so let me go into, here's my editor. All right, so I got my editor back now, so we can see our points look fine. To clear the display of this preview, there is this little highlight, this little button that shows up on your screen, and you see if you hover on it, it says click here to dismiss the survey preview graphics. So I'll click that. All those little purple lines go away. All right, so let's add now my figure definition. So I'm going to do it by query, and I'm going to select a property. I want to do it by figure name. And again, I'm going to use the starts with option. Works really well with our figure prefix library and our descriptors. So I'm going to do CS for concrete slab. And then again, I'll preview in drawing. So minimize that. And what that's doing then is, I include, because this is the one that I don't want right here. So let me, yeah, see I did starts with, so that's the one I want to get rid of. I want to use does not start with. All right, so now let me preview in drawing, and now I should get the opposite. Get that to minimize. So now you'll see it is highlighting all of the other figures in my drawing except for this one that I have this closed rectangle. And the reason I want to exclude this one is because I don't have any elevation data for those corners, so I need to exclude that one. Right. I do have some feature lines being drawn by offset commands. It does not highlight those, but it is highlighting the main feature line for this curve group that I have. So it highlights the main one, but it does not highlight any of the offsets, but it will select the highlights as part of that query because their names match my query condition. All right, let me get back in. Let me clear that. So I'll clear that preview. All right, so we can see visually what objects we're selecting, but we can also come in here and display in our editor. So I'll click on that, and that will open up the panorama. So let me slide that into view, and we'll see now I have two tabs. I have Survey Points Editor, and this is all the points that were in that query. So it makes it real nice that I can come in here and check, do I have valid elevations for everything? So that looks good. And I also have the figure editor, which is showing me which figures were selected based on that query. So I can come in and see what kind of data I have on that. And you'll see that they all the names do not begin with the CS. So let me close that down. All right, and the last thing I'll do here is I need to actually add this to my survey database. So I'm going to tell it to save the query, and that will now show up over here in our survey tab, and we now have this data for surface E01. All right, so I'm going to close down my editor. To get that back, once I've created a query, I can come in here, just right-click on it, edit the query, opens the editor right back up. So but I do have to save it. Other things we can do with this, we can insert all of these points and figures into my drawing. So if you go to a new drawing, I can be real selective with this now. Instead of having to hunt through which points I want to bring into my drawing, I can now use this query. Okay, so hopefully some of you that do a lot with survey data and a lot of point data in Civil 3D, you're starting already to see some of the value of this. This is very powerful compared to how we had to do this with 2011. Right, what I want to show is I'm actually come down here and I want to actually add this data now to a surface. Let me jump over to Prospector first, and I need a surface. So I'm going to create a new surface, and I'm not sure what my parameters are, so I'm going to set E01, and I'm going to put a style on it that shows contours, some 1s and 5s. All right, so I now have a surface. So what we do in 2011, the workflow there is come into here, import figures into my drawing, import survey points into my drawing. Then I would go into Prospector, and then I would need to, actually have to be, I made that in the wrong surface, in the wrong drawing. Goodness gracious. Kind of watch what I'm doing here. All right. Kind of watch when you're working in Master View that you get in the right file. All right, so I got my surface. So what we do is we'd make a point group of all the points that we want. We would then go to our surface definition. We would then add the point group, and then we'd go to break lines and either select all the figures that we wanted to use, or we could go in the survey database under figures, and there's a command here to create break lines through the survey database. So that's 2011. For 13, what we can do now is we can define these queries to sort and manage which data we're using, and then we can come and there's a command here to add these to a surface. So I'm going to select that command. So this is a new command for 13. Up at the top, you tell it which surface you want. So I've got my E01 surface. You can build the surface here if you don't have one. I kind of like doing things the same way every time. So I usually go to Prospector and make mine. But there is a new surface button here. All right, there's two ways to do this now. We can either insert the query results in the drawing as a point group in figures. It will then add the point group and the figures as breakline data to the surface. This is identical to the way we did it in 2011, the little workflow that I just walked us through. So you will get points in the drawing, you will get figures in the drawing, and then you will get point group, and then that data will be added to the surface. This method is not dynamic, so if I change anything in my survey database, I need to re-import the points into the drawing, update my group, rebuild my surface. Right. The second method is reference the survey database for dynamic query results. What this one does then is it will not bring points or figures into my drawing. It will take the data from the database and add it directly to the surface, and it creates a dynamic link. So then if I add more data or I change my query, that surface will update and reflect those changes without me having to then import points into my drawing, figures into my drawing, and then update my point group and then my surface. So I'm going to go ahead and do this method. It does not exclude me from bringing this data into my drawing. I can still do that. This just dynamically links it to the surface. All right. The mid-ordinate distance, this is for our curved figures. How do we supplement and add data? 1 foot is a little large, I think, so I'm going to do just 1/10 of a foot. I'm going to set that to 0.1. There's a little button here we go pick. What that'll do then is on my curved figures that you see here, instead of getting a triangle point at this location, one at the midpoint and one at the end, it will actually interpolate additional data, so I'll get a lot more triangulation and a lot nicer looking contours there. So let me pick OK to that. Right, and am I not seeing the? Oh, it is there. Gosh, I'm blind, and there's a problem with working with these existing colors. So now I now have my contours in here. So there's my surface. We can see we have contours. Let me go ahead and select that and just do a quick object viewer on it, just so we can see the data. All right, so we can see there's that nice retaining wall with the figures. And I am not seeing any of my curved line work in there. All right. In the drawing here, or in Prospector, we will see that under our definition now there are 2 new categories. One is called point survey queries, so this is showing me the query that it's using, and then figure survey queries, and it's actually showing the same query. Okay. Let me go back and see, because I did not get any of my offset. So let me edit query here. And again, so figures, yeah, so it's not showing me any of my offset, so I may have to stumble here a little bit, because if we look in our figure listing here, oh, that's why it's not showing up. I have a different version of my drawing. So these figures that were created, they're actually from another database, so I apologize for that. I did not, when I imported the data into this copy of the database, I'm not getting these figures. So this is actually, I got a second version of it, so that's why those aren't showing up. So anyways, it's working fine. The operator is not working fine here, so I'm glad I can explain that. Yeah, I've got a different copy of this that I was playing with when I did the original version of this drawing. I imported the curve lines with offset commands to create all the lip of gutter and edge of pavement and top and back of curb features. So that's some different training here. All right, so hopefully, aside from my slight confusion there, hopefully you're seeing some of the power of this. Nice thing about this now, being this dynamic link here, is if I come in and say I edit my query here, and I'm going to take out the spot elevations. All right. So what will happen is once I save that, we should see my triangles won't, my contours should not extend out to these points or out to here because we're going to remove those from the equation. So let me save that. And then I'll come back into Prospector and rebuild, make sure I'm on the right drawing here, and rebuild. So as soon as I rebuild my surface now, just by taking the SV description query condition out of that query, we'll see that these points were removed from the surface. So it is a dynamic link. It did require me to rebuild, but I could have had automatic turned on and it would have been real time. So hopefully you can see some of the power, especially if you're working with multiple crews or multiple days of survey data. As I add data in, as long as it matches my query conditions, that data is automatically added to my data or to my surface model. All right, so that is survey queries. So let me jump back into the old PowerPoint here. PowerPoint icon, there we go. All right, the last thing I'm going to look at now this afternoon is what's called the survey, or not the survey, the coordinate geometry editor, the COGO editor. This is available on the Analyze ribbon tab, and then if you click over here on the Survey button, it'll expand the menu, and that's where you're going to find the coordinate geometry editor, or you can type in at the command line, the command name is COGO editor. All right, so that's where that command is located. This is what the editor looks like. All right, it's an interactive, tabular-based editor that allows you to put in coordinate geometry information to build a traverse. All right, you're going to have up at the top, they do have some scale and rotation parameters. So if you are doing maybe you did it in ground coordinates, you can then scale your traverse up to grid coordinates or the other way around. You can change it from feet to meters depending on what your data is. You can rotate it to line up maybe with a different basis of bearing. For traverse control, you do need to have a point of beginning and then a point of closure if you want to do any kind of traverse adjustment. Right? And then up at the top here is where you would select what adjustment method you're going to use. Okay. In the table down below is where you then tell it what types of sides, what they're going to be. You're going to have lines and curves, and there's a couple of different ways to define curves. You can either do it by tangent curves, radial curves, or by chord, where you put in the chord bearing and distance. So some different ways of defining the data, and I'll get in and show you how these works. All right. A few other buttons. When you enter the data, an example I have today is putting in some legal description information. You can put the bearing format in based on compass directions. I can type just N and it'll draw northerly. I could type in S, it'll go southerly. Or I can do it by northing with an angle in degrees, minutes, and seconds, and then east or west. I can do south, east, or west, and it'll then interpret that as angles. I can also do decimal seconds by typing, oops, didn't want to do that yet, by typing in 19.5 would be 19.5 seconds, so you can put in decimal seconds. I can also do that by compass quadrant. So quadrant 1 is northeast, southeast is 2, southwest is 3, northwest is 4. So this value here, 1.70 space 14 space 19, is identical to N space 70 space 14 space 19 space east. There are several other formats you can use. You can look at the help. If you click the help button on the editor, you can go into and see the formats. I've had the best luck with these two different formats here. You can also specify things by point number, and you just put in number space 2 space point number, and it'll actually either, if it's a bearing, it'll get the angle between those 2 points, or if you're doing a distance, it'll get the distance between those 2 points. They also have a button in the editor here, and that's going to be this button right here, which lets you pick the points in the drawing, and it'll go and grab those. Same thing for your point of beginning, point of closure. There's a button, either pick the COGO point in the drawing, or this button over here will let you go pick a point, and it'll then read the easting and northing off that selected point. In addition to specifying points or angles and distances, you can do mathematical. You can say, okay, I want the distance to be from point 21 to 22, but it's half that distance, so I could divide that value by 2. So I could say, in parentheses, 20 to 21, close parentheses, divide by 2, and it'll then divide that distance by 2. We can also load traverse data from Polyline. So if you want to generate some legal descriptions or look at closure of some polylines, we can draw the polyline in AutoCAD or however you want to create it. And then there's a button here in the editor, this one with a little box, Polyline, that will load the traverse from Polyline. It will then fill out the data based on line and curve information that it extracts from that polyline. Okay. You can also go the other way, that if we manually enter in the traverse data, we can then generate a polyline in the drawing. And that's what I've been using it for. I've checked some legal descriptions with it. So it's a nice way to, you get the tabular editor. I can compare the typed in information versus what's actually written in the legal description, and then I can generate the polyline to visually see what's going on. And the polyline, if you are doing some traverse adjustment, it will generate the polyline based on the adjusted values, not the entered values. So we can, I can set it to no adjustment, create the polyline, change it to compass rule, generate the polyline, and then I'll have 2 polylines, one showing the unadjusted data and the other one showing the adjusted value. All right. I did find some bugs. All right. Of course, the first traverse the first legal description I ever entered in had a situation where we were coming along this traverse course here from point 45 to 46 is a line segment, but then we had a non-tangent radial curve, and the way that is defined, you define the bearing and distance to the center point, which is over here. You then tell it what the radius is, and then the included angle, which gets you to this point. I then had a compound curve or a tangent curve, and what I'm finding is it does not attach it correctly. So when I draw from end point of this curve to center to end point, it's locating the center up here. If they were truly tangent, this line and this original line off my first curve should be right on top of each other. So it's not calcing the tangent correctly when it comes out of a radial curve. It should be following where this green line is as opposed to going where this magenta line is. This also, what I'm showing you here, this graphics, this kind of brownish magenta and yellow line work is actually displayed on the screen real time while I'm working in the COGO editor. So it's showing me the purple one is the course I'm actually on, and then the arrows are pointing in the direction of the traverse. Everything else is just I've drawn the geometry for the purpose of the exhibit. I've sent this to Autodesk, and we're trying to work out a resolution to this, but that is a bug. So you do watch out, and it's when you work with radial curves. Okay. I also found a situation with radial curves when I have I'm coming in, and again, I have a non-tangent curve, so I do a radial curve. In this case, there's my bearing and distance to the center line, and there's my included angle. It's applying that counterclockwise, and I think it does that because that's the way AutoCAD rotates arcs. Everything is counterclockwise. I want to go clockwise. I want it to go this way. I have tried putting in a negative radius, but that just flips it over. That didn't work on this case. I also tried a negative included. Oops, didn't want that. A negative included angle, and what it did then is it went clockwise, or excuse me, went counterclockwise all the way to here. The resolution to both these problems, when we have the curve not being created tangent, and we want clockwise as opposed to counterclockwise, is calculate the chord bearing and distance of that, and then do the curve definition by chord. That's the only way I could do it. So the way I did it, in this case, I had it draw the arc all the way around here. I then imported that polyline. I drew a line segment across here, labeled the bearing and distance. I then changed this from radial to chord, put in the chord bearing, the radius, or the chord angle, the chord bearing, distance, and then the radius and include angle of the arc, and then it was able to go with that. All right, so kind of just wanted to make you aware of that. So let me jump in now. I've got a second drawing here. That one here. So I've got a couple of points that we're going to play with. I'm just going to do some editing on that here. So I'm going to again go to my Analyze tab, Survey, and there's the Coordinate Geometry Editor. Let me put that on the screen. It kind of stinks when you only have one monitor here because there's not a whole lot of room. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to establish a point of beginning. I'm just going to fake in a traverse here. So I'm going to go ahead and select that button, come into my drawing, and I'll pick that point, and it highlights it. You'll see you get a little glyph here indicating that's my point of beginning. If I want to do a closed traverse, I can then also specify a point of closure. And they kind of assume you want to do traverse because as soon as I go to edit something, so I clicked over here on this field, it's asking me, and it's always going to ask you. It gets a little annoying sometimes, but you want to use that beginning point as the point of closure. So if you're doing a closed loop, sure, go ahead and do that. And all it does is it adds that point in. Okay, I can delete that if I don't want it. And get that out, and now I can go and pick another point or enter in a different point number, or I can actually type in a number here and you'll see it grab 0.18. So I am going to do a little closed loop on here. All right, so I'm going to do angle and direction. I'm going to do a line segment, so here you can tell what different segment types you're doing. So I can do line, tangent curve, chord curve, or radial curve, and then I can also do side shots, which are lines, but they will be excluded from any of the traverse adjustment methods that are used here. All right, so I'm going to do a line. I'm going to do the first line by point number, so I'm going to pick here, and then I'm going to use the pick Koga point. I'm going to say go from that point to that point, and then same thing, distance, and I want the same distance, and I can actually just type in 18 to 19 as well, so I can do that, and you'll see it'll then highlight for me that segment, and it does look correct. Okay. Stretch that out. Didn't stretch that. All right. Panning and zooming. Unfortunately, I can't pan or zoom, but there is a little button here where I can say zoom to selection. It'll zoom to that segment. I can say zoom to extents. It'll zoom to the extents of all the segments. Or you can zoom in drawing. And what I do there is I zoom out a bit, and then you have to pick a window, and then it'll zoom in on that. So I can now get that done. All right. So I've got my first leg done. So I'm going to do my second leg, and I'm just going to do, say, I want to go, I don't know, southwesterly. So I'll do south, and I'll just maybe 45 degrees west, and then I'll do a distance of 700 feet, and it'll add that segment in. So that's that segment I just put in. As I click on these, you'll see as I pick on that row, it should be highlighting. There it goes. It'll highlight which row I'm on in magenta. Okay. I can now do my next point, and maybe I don't have points, but I can now go to this button here to select locations in the drawing. So say I want to go, I want to define that as my angle and distance. So there's my angle, and actually my distance I have to do separate, and there's my distance. Okay, so I can pick on things and do that, and then I'll do my final section as a line segment here. So that one needs to be north, it looks about, I'm going to say about 48 degrees east, and here I did 7, that's about 650. See how we did? It was pretty close. All right, so I'm going to pick on the zoom to extents here, so that shows me a whole traverse there. I can now say generate a polyline. It will generate a polyline, so I now have that polyline drawn. But I can also say, well, let's look at the adjustments. So I'll go ahead and just do a compass rule adjustment. So it needs to adjust based on that method all of my angles and distances to where it will then end back up at that exact same point of closure. And I can say, well, I've got that. Let's generate a polyline from that traverse as well. So I've now got both polylines. I can also add points to my drawing. All right, and it's going to use my next available point number. It's going to use whatever the default description is, and it'll then place points at every endpoint. If you have arc segments, I think you get points at the radial if you use the radial method. All right. I can save these. So if you're doing a big, long legal description, I can come in here and there it is. There we go. I can save this. I'm saving them just in my survey folder, demo, traverse. Okay, and then tomorrow when I come in, I want to work on this some more. I can come in, open up. Yes, I want to continue losing that data, and I can open that traverse again. Brings me right to it. All right. Well, I'm going to show one of the other ones that I keyed in. Let me a couple of examples here. So here's what my legal description looks like. Okay, a bunch of stuff. So we start at one first point, go to the second point. Then I go to which actually establishes the point of beginning, and then a bunch of thences for lines and segments. There's some angles in here where it talks about the bearing of the angle, central angle values, so I do need to have that data. They do have a curve calculator built into it. Come on. Be that way. They have a curve calculator built into it to allow you to zoom back out, to generate some of the other values if you don't have them. All right, so I'm going to bring up the editor. So let me open up, and I've got all these traverses. I'll do lot number 4 here. All right, so this one now, we actually start at this point here. All right, and then we come down. So that line 1 is picked, so that first line comes to there. And actually, that's not my point at beginning. No, don't use that. So we'll put a little description, 2.0 at beginning. So it's real nice that you can actually put some data in here to help you kind of keep track of where you are. All right, so line 1 is from my reference point, 2.0 at beginning. And then we have all these series of segments. And we come through, and we'll see I do have a radial corner here. I want to insert, I want to zoom to that. Okay, so we do have a little short radial corner segment. And again, I wish they'd put a scale factor on that so I can come in and zoom out. All right. But anyway, so you go through, we can enter all of our data in, and it's just, again, you type it in, add new values. Pretty straightforward. This one, if I want to look at the traverse, I'll do adjustment. Okay. This one is not closing because I didn't pick a closure point. So it's an open end. So if I say, go back to point 19. All right, so let me zoom extend. So their zooming is a little confusing here. So it's trying to close back around on itself there. So no adjustment, that's what it looks like. Compass rule, there we go. So because I'm starting with this point here, the adjustment's way off. Doesn't make sense for this one. But I can then look at this little button here, which brings up a little HTML viewer so I can see I'm off by 268 feet. That's, I'm off by 38 feet. My error enclosure is 1 in 268. So that's probably not a good solution. So what I can do, makes it a little easier to work with these, is let me first set this back to no adjustment, and then I'll say generate the polyline. Okay, and then we'll close that down. So I now have this polyline. What I'll do is I'll just p-edit, edit vertice, break it to the next vertice, and go. Okay, so now I've got my actual boundary, and what I'll do is we'll add that in. So I'm going to come to my editor, and this time I'm going to select my polyline. So I'll pick that polyline, and it will go through and it'll read all of the data off that polyline, put in all the lines and curves. It does change the curves. If you did them by tangent or by radial, it will put them in as chord, which is fine because to do a traverse adjustment, actually it does it. It's doing those around the chord segment. So again, I can look at my closure report now. So now, so my error is less than 2 decimal places, so I'm real good. So there's my, I'm 0.26 thousandths in the y direction, 14 thousandths in the x or east direction. Okay, so it does show that. So what I can then do is say, well, show me based on compass rule, and that's how it will then adjust my data. All right, so I can do an adjustment, or I can see if I have an error in my model. Okay, and again, I can then recreate a polyline from that. Okay, kind of hopefully give you an idea of what the workflow is. Again, a great tool here to either select a closed polyline or a polyline region, try to do a closure analysis on it. Oh, actually, that's why it's not closing. I need the same point here. There we go. So now if I do my adjustment, I don't know which, I forgot which way my model is going here. All right, it's not going to highlight for me. Anyways, I can then export and save this. I'm not going to play with it too much more here. All right. So again, great way to go from written legal description, enter it. The option to save it, again, allows me to come back at any time and grab any of these traverses here. So again, I come and open up any of the ones I've worked on. So there's lot 4. Let's do lot 1. All right. It's just telling me it was trying to find a point number 1000. There is no 1000. It was easting and northing, and it figures that out. So we can now see, so there's that traverse. I can open up some of the other ones that we did on this project. There's lot 2. So lot 2 is down below here, so I probably need to zoom extents on that one. There we go. So we can see where that one is. And again, if I need it, I can import the polyline and work with that. All right, that is everything I had intended to show. So I get back up. So that's the end of my PowerPoint presentation here. I have just a couple minutes left, so jump back to that slide here just so we have a little screen. I don't know if I can unmute, but let me see if I can find my attendees. And I can't unmute, so if anyone has any questions, you can enter them in the question panel. If you feel like you've had enough for one day, great. I hope you saw some compelling stuff to get you eager to move from 2011 to 2013. I thank you for your time this afternoon. Hopefully it was worth your while. The next webinar that I am planning on doing is in 2 weeks, and that is going to be looking at new features in surface modeling. All right, so I'm trying to break these up about every 2 to 3 weeks now, and they're going to be anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour in length just to cover some of these new features. So again, thank you for your time. If you'd like to ask a question, go ahead and do that now. I will stick around for another 5 minutes or so, answer any questions. If not, if they come up later, feel free to email me. I will gladly answer those for you.